Inflation, it's the #1 issue facing Canadians, well, and Americans as well. Hello, I'm Adrienne BATRA. With me is Brian Lilley. All right, Brian, let's get right to it. The Bank of Canada has now raised the interest rates by 100 basis points, or 2.5%. Break that down. What does that mean for the average Canadian household?
It means that if you're on a variable rate mortgage, your monthly payments are likely going up. It depends on the structure of your mortgage. So, your mileage will vary. Talk to your bank, talk to your mortgage broker, your mortgage company, and find out what's happening. If you're on a standard rate mortgage, well, come renewal, things are going to look very grim for you. Now, this is so frustrating because in the last election, Adrienne, last August, Justin Trudeau was asked, as inflation was starting to creep up, only around 4%. Ooh, that's looking big. We're not used to that. He was asked about monetary policy, and the Bank of Canada, should it be doing, tasked again with fighting inflation? And Trudeau famously said, "You'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy. I think about families." And I blasted him at the time, and all of us did, for saying, "Don't you get it? Your monetary policy impacts families' budgets." But he doesn't get it because he doesn't pay his bills. He doesn't know how to balance a checkbook. He doesn't know how to make payroll. He doesn't think about these things. So the Bank of Canada said inflation was temporary. It wasn't temporary. It's not transitory. It is continuing to go up. To try and control inflation, the Bank of Canada has now had 4 interest rate hikes since March. If you're on a variable rate mortgage, a $500,000, let's just say for argument point, $500,000, 25-year amortization, variable rate mortgage, you're paying about $550 a month more potentially right now, compared to earlier this year.
And that is just on your housing. Then there's heating. Then there's your groceries. Then there's actually trying to have a life now that we're out of the pandemic, for the most part, trying to enjoy your family, go see the people that you haven't seen in the last 2.5 years. So if your very basic housing cost is eroding an extra potentially $500 from your disposable income, doesn't leave much room for all of those other things, Brian, that Canadians are facing each and every day, particularly on the cost of groceries, meat, poultry. Everything has gone up and up and up. And the fact is, there are very real issues that this federal government, the Liberal NDP government, hasn't dealt with. It's easy for us to say, blame Trudeau, blame Trudeau. Well, there is obvious, very clear information and data that shows the amount of money that the Trudeau Liberals have spent is contributing to the amount and level of inflation, correct?
He's been warned about this by private sector economists. He's been warned about this by a report from Scotiabank issued last month, a report from Scotiabank issued last fall. Doug Porter, who's the chief economist for Bank of Montreal, said, yes, government spending is part of it. And the Trudeau government has dismissively said, well, in fact, very dismissively, Chrystia Freeland last month, with a smirk when asked about this, said, we've already done that, and just kind of sloughed it off. No, you haven't. What they reduced was pandemic spending. But overall, government spending is going up in every other area. Now, the Prime Minister is rightly bragging that Canada is doing great on job creation. We've got more people working now than pre-pandemic. But Adrienne, I looked at the numbers. There's a couple 100,000 more people working in the private sector as employees, but more people are no longer considered self-employed, meaning entrepreneurs. There's fewer of them, and that number outstrips the number of new private sector employees. The job growth has been more than 400,000 people being added to the rolls of the public sector across the country. Federal, provincial, municipal. That's not sustainable job growth. So, when they're talking about how they're fighting back against it, it's hiring more government employees, which drives up more government spending, bragging about childcare, which is more government spending, and yet it's going to benefit some people. And if you're one of them, it's great. But my kids are older, don't need childcare. Your kids older, don't need childcare. If you have no kids, you don't need childcare. If you're a senior, it doesn't help you. It doesn't help you fill the tank. It doesn't help you fill the grocery cart. None of this matters to anybody except people who are in a very narrow band of having kids in childcare. And that's what he brags about as his way to say we're doing something, or hiring more public servants. And if you haven't noticed, by the way, the federal public service can't seem to get anything right these days because you can't get basic government services.
Now, one thing that I said right off the top, Brian, is this is not just a Canadian phenomenon. This is really a global phenomenon in terms of rates. But where we look always close to is our American cousins down south. And their president, Joe Biden, has been repeating the same line over and over again. Putin's war, the fight in Ukraine, is contributing to all of these issues with respect to inflation. The cost of a gallon of gasoline in the United States right now is hovering near $4.90. And we hear from the Trudeau Liberals, I just saw the same narrative. It's the war in Ukraine. It's those things that are contributing to so much of this. But now we see the president of the United States, whose approval ratings have never been lower. I mean, Jimmy Carter is laughing somewhere. He is now going likely on bended knee to the Saudis, who they've called bad actors, who he said were pariahs. He's going to go meet with the Crown Prince to ask them to increase production. Yet here at home, we have Republicans, we have Democrats even, and conservatives on our side of the border saying Keystone XL, Keystone XL, why can't we build Keystone XL? And I tie all this together because Justin Trudeau has been traveling around the world and he's been meeting with his counterparts from around the world. Have we had any reports, any feedback, any information that has suggested that Justin Trudeau has said to the president of the United States, Mr. President, we have your solution. Get Keystone XL pipeline built. So that helps both Canadians and Americans to stop being reliant on this Saudi oil that Joe Biden is going and begging for. Where am I wrong?
You're not wrong at all. That has not happened. There's been a mild promise to increase by a few 100,000 barrels a day, I think it is. It's a small amount and not until the end of the year. So it's not enough to help. Trudeau was in the UK a while ago, one of his international trips. He met with Boris Johnson and Mark Rutte, the president of the Netherlands. And the Netherlands, which is reliant on Russian oil and gas, was asking for their allies to increase production. Trudeau used the opportunity when this came up at the news conference to talk about how important it is to get off of fossil fuels and move faster and harder towards a green economy. Boris Johnson, who would take no lessons on his green bona fides from Trudeau, he himself, many similar policies, despite being a conservative, he said, yes, we will increase production. We will work with our leaseholders, meaning the people with the drilling rights, to increase production, to help. We've never done that. We have not done that. When it's raised, we just hear, well, those are all long-term solutions. Well, look, you've been blocking these things for the last 7 years. You've failed on getting other export opportunities, including twinning the Trans Mountain Pipeline. You killed Northern Gateway. You killed Energy East. You killed a ton of projects, and you did not fight hard enough for Keystone XL. So, this could be part of the solution to a whole lot of problems, but Justin Trudeau isn't interested in it. I mean, and if I can just add one more thing, it's all about climate change for him. That's the only policy that matters, not your ability to balance the books, not the ability to put food on the table. And that is witnessed by something I started talking about last week, and it's all over the news now, this push to get farmers to use less fertilizer, which will drive up the price of food, further contributing to inflation. Why is he pushing for that? Climate change.
And the Greenie Acts on both sides of the border, Brian, bring this issue really home for Canadians and Americans. Because let's face it, the Bidens, the Trudeaus, they're not circling themselves with people that deal with this on a regular basis. They're not going to the grocery store. I understand, of course, the president, the prime minister, they don't go shopping for themselves. These are all things that they're, immune to. They don't have in their circles people who are, in the case of the United States, with a massive baby formula shortage, dealing with that. For Justin Trudeau, he doesn't care much for economic policy. We know that he has said that by admission. They don't understand what it takes to feed a family of 4 for a week. They are oblivious to this. And we are in a time of the year, summer season. People want to take some road trips and Go visit those families we talked about earlier that they haven't seen in some time. The cost of gas has become so restrictive and prohibitive that here we go again. And then we're going to come in for a long, cold winter. And I sound frustrated because I think millions of Canadians are frustrated by all of this. We have a weak and ineffectual opposition in this country to try to hold the Trudeau government accountable. We have one opposition party that's basically folded themselves into the Liberals. But Brian, I bring all this up for the very because I think that there is coming a point in this country where the Canadians are, it's when there's going to be a tipping point. And maybe we saw some frustration with the convoy and all of those things that ensued from there. But something else is happening out there. Canadians are getting angrier as they continue to have their own disposable income eroded with the government doing nothing.
I think that you're going to start seeing more anger, more frustration from Canadians. Justin Trudeau is going to continue to hold his base. Whether the Conservatives, currently in the middle of a leadership race that's producing a lot of drama that has distracted from some of Trudeau's failures, whether they can harness that and get people on board remains to be seen. Polls have them on either side of the Trudeau Liberals, some above, some below. But right now, Trudeau is down to his core base because Canadians are looking at what's happening, whether it's the cost of living, whether it's the lack of basic services, whether it's the fact that we do have a leadership that is completely out of touch with this and acts as if everything's okay. They are frustrated and they're being turned off. I've thought for a long time that we needed to change in leadership at the top. I'm not sure we'll get a chance to do that for a while, but all this talk of an early election, it may not look good for Trudeau in the end of it.
And the argument remains the same for both leaders on both sides of the border in Canada and the US. There is not one area of public policy that they have touched that is going well. Log on to Facebook and Twitter. Let us know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.